I am calling this meeting of the Town of Silver City Council to order. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. The next item on the agenda is proclamations, and since October 15 through 21, 2017 is Buddy Walk Week. The town would like to recognize this with a proclamation. Would Ms. Galindo and Mr. Torietta please come forward?
On the photograph, we'll bring them all up. You and Ken? Come on.
We need extra time. Oh, okay.
Come on, Bubba.
Whereas the Buddy Walk was developed by the National Down Syndrome Society in 1995 to bring together a wide range of concerned individuals, reaching out to family, friends, teachers, co-workers, professionals, and leaders in the community to promote awareness and inclusion for people with Down syndrome and to raise funds for education, research, and advocacy programs. And whereas the Buddy Walk is from coast to coast and abroad, hundreds of thousands of people walk in the Buddy Walk each year. The goal of the Buddy Walk is to promote understanding and acceptance of people with Down syndrome. And whereas the ARC of New Mexico's mission is to improve the quality of life for individuals with disabilities of all ages by advocating for equal opportunities and choices in where and how they learn, live, work, play, and socialize. The ARC of New Mexico promotes self-determination, healthy families, effective support systems, and partnership. And whereas the ARC's Family Support Network of Silver City and Deming are families working and planning together to host the second annual Buddy Walk to celebrate individuals with Down syndrome during the month of October, Disability Awareness Month. On Saturday, October 21, 2017, at Golf Park in Silver City, New Mexico. Now therefore, I, Ken Ladner, Mayor of the Town of Silver City, do hereby proclaim October 15 through October 21, 2017 as Buddy Walk Week. Thank you very much. Would you like to say a few words? Both of you?
Thank you. This feels like such an honor.
We really appreciate it, and this has been actually kind of a dream of mine to have a buddy walk. It always has been, but as you see the families here, we really believe in inclusion, and we really appreciate everything the town of Silver City has done for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you.
You want to say something?
She did just fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, I would just like to remind you of one thing that I read was this Saturday, the 21st, is when the Buddy Walk will take place at Golf Park. Vicki, what time will that be?
Well, actually,
It starts at 9 o'clock, and if you pre-register, it's at 9. If you pre-register, it's 9:30, but around that time,
Okay,
till 3 o'clock.
thank you. We'd like to invite everybody who can come to come out and join us in the Buddy Walk. It's a really special event. The next item on the agenda is council comments. Councilor Bedison?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no comment.
Councilor Kano?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few things. First of all, I'd just like to announce that at noon on the 18th of October, which is a Thursday, at the GRC, the Global Research Center at WNMU, there's going to be a Will Lunch and Learn program by Dr. Stephen Fox. He will be speaking about segregation and discrimination in Silver City. He's been doing interviews for the past couple of years now, I think, with several locals from about the 1940s on to present, different age groups, and he's got a lot of really great information, and he'd like for people to come and listen to him speak about that. So it's a free event, and like I said, the 18th of October at noon at the GRC. Also this week I've been participating in Glam Week at WNMU. Glam Week is sponsored by the Center for Gender Equity and Social Justice at WNMU. They've been having a whole lot of events. The theme this year is Soy Yo, Be Who We Want to Be. So they've been doing a lot of really great stuff. Today we had a workshop with a group that's doing some policy changes. They're called Equality New Mexico, and they had a workshop for us, and it was really, really good. They'll be in the community on Thursday, so you'll see students around passing out buttons and just bringing attention to the fact that there's all kinds of different people at Western and in the community. So, and then the last thing, I asked the chief if he would answer some questions for me. Basically, I feel like we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but at the same time, it's really important. I live in the North Loop area, and we've been having a lot of problems with ATVs. So Chief, if you could just go over the policy again and reiterate the fact that just because it's in the county doesn't mean it's in the city. Thanks.
Okay, basically the ordinance, thank you, Mayor, City Council, sorry. Basically the ordinance says you can't operate an ATV or a side-by-side within the city limits on our streets in our jurisdiction. It's fairly simple. Don't let them on our streets. There's a pretty significant fine associated with that if you get cited for it.
Okay, and then my other question would be, if we see someone, should we just call Central Dispatch, or how should we report it?
Yes, please, call Central Dispatch at 388-8840.
Thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Councilor Ray?
No comment, sir.
Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Kano, for bringing that up. I too had ATVs in my neighborhood today. They were going so fast I couldn't even capture them on the cell phone. I just want to thank all of the nonprofit and supportive organizations that make our town the wonderful place that it is. September and October are particularly busy beautiful months here in Silver City. You heard Councilor Cano talk about things that were happening at the university and happening as part of the Western Institute for Lifelong Learning. Thank you, and I appreciate the Buddy Walk folks for coming tonight. That'll be going on later in the month. And last weekend, we had the Red Dot, and also I went to the Rotary auction, which was really a lot of fun. I understand that someone is driving a 1981 Porsche around town from that. Yeah, William Knudten bought that. I just want to express my gratitude for all of that is going on. I believe that the Red Dot studio tours are also happening this weekend, and I think it will be really fun. I want to address something that citizens and other folks have brought to my attention, and I just want to put out to the citizenry here, any federally recognized holiday, that is a federally recognized holiday, is businesses have absolute authority to either stay open or shut down on that federally recognized holiday. It's completely at their discretion. And so a business could choose to shut down on the second Monday in October, but they could also choose to put up a sign calling that holiday really pretty much anything they want. So, for example, a bank could close and say, we are closed for a legal holiday, but we are celebrating indigenous peoples of, our area. As well, a newspaper could be doing that too. So that's something that's completely under the discretion of the business that is either going to be open or closed on a federally recognized holiday. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Bedison?
Thank you, Mayor. I just, kind of forgot because it happened so quickly, but I also saw UTV racing down 180 into town, just over by Alabama, and I could not catch anything. It was going so fast. All it looked like was either dark green or black. I wasn't sure. And I did call the Central Dispatch and stated who I was, that they were not permitted in town, as far as I knew by the municipal code. So I just wanted to let you know that I think calling Central Dispatch is important. I used the non-emergency number, and that's the one. Unfortunately, I couldn't give a very good description, and it was really going at such a high rate of speed. I also wanted to mention, because I should have mentioned it before, but last year I had the honor of attending the first annual Buddy Walk, and it was really amazing. And I know this year I'm going to miss the walk, the first part of the walk, but I'll be there later in the afternoon after my appointment's over. And I just really want to say that it's an incredible event. It's so full of love for everyone with special abilities that I just encourage folks to come out like the mayor did. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have one comment, and I'll say maybe I can speak for the council. We're glad you're back, Ann. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the September 26, 2017 regular meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to approve the minutes of the regular council meeting of the town of Silver City, September 12th, 2017.
Is there a second? Councilor Bedison.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would second that motion as stated.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Wait.
Opposed, nay.
Ann has her hand up.
Oh, Ann?
Councilman Smith said September 12th, but it should be September 26th.
Thank you. Let me restate the motion, please. Dyslexia.
Thank you, Ann.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to restate the motion.
Please do.
I'd like to move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the town of Silver City of September 26th, 2017.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second the restatement.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public input, and no one's signed up, so we'll move right along to the next item, which is reports. Mr. Brown?
Mayor and Council, as you know, we are required to adopt a 40-year water plan to protect our water rights that the town owns. And we've been working with Blue Groundwater since, I believe, 2000. And they've been doing the updates, building a water model for us, helping us with the regional water plan. And so Dave Romero with Blue Groundwater is here to present the update to the 40-year water plan.
Mr. Romero?
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Our firm prepared a draft report, which is a supplement on the 40-year water plan, and I'll be talking about that this evening. I've got it running up on the screens, and I think everyone's got a handout, and I'll be happy to take any questions while I'm speaking or at the end. The town of Silver City provides water to approximately 20,000 residents in the town and to 4 water associations, Pinos Altos, Tyrone, Rosedale, and the Uranus Valley. And a really important aspect of the water supply is it all comes from wells. It comes from 2 well fields and the Gabby Hayes replacement well. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a bit. And, town interest is in reliability of the source of water that comes to the wells and well field service life in the long term. It's easy to think about, though you turn on water at your faucet, it comes out of a well, but how does the water that goes into the well, how can we characterize that? How big is the aquifer? Where is it coming from? So we're looking deeper into those kinds of questions as part of planning. And this technical assessment is part of the 40-year water plan. The town developed the 40-year water plan in 1993. In 2006 and 2017, we did some supplemental updates with the town, for the town. And today we're going to be talking about the 2017 document. And it's in draft form. It's currently on the town website. Anyone could access it and provide any comments they may wish, or ask any questions. To give a little bit of context, this is figure 1 from the report. And so just in terms of looking at that, the town, of course, is here sort of near the center of the image. And Pinos Altos, Uranus Valley, and Rosedale and Tyrone are the areas where water is routed to besides the town. And the water comes from wells that straddle the Continental Divide. So out to the west here, you'll see this blue line that runs down the figure, and this blue line is the Continental Divide. And the wells straddle the Continental Divide. To the west, you've got Frank's Wellfield. To the east, there's Woodward Wellfield. And then along Highway 90 is the Gabby Hayes replacement well and the Anderson well. Now, water is diverted from those wells, pumped up to the town, runs through the system, and then water is released, is routed down to the wastewater treatment plant, and it's treated, and part of that water is released into San Vicente Arroyo. One thing that's very important about the water that's released into San Vicente Arroyo is it percolates down into the ground, it reaches the regional aquifer, and it recharges it. And a few years ago, the town applied for credit for that water. And the credit was approved with the state engineer office, and that water is very pivotal to the regional water plan that's underway. And so in addition to the wells that currently exist, the town has a permit to drill 2 other wells down near the airport area well field. And plans are underway to drill one of those wells later this year. And the regional water plan will involve, at first, it'll run in stages. The first stage is to develop that well and route water to the town of Hurley. Eventually, in the next phase of the project, a water line can be run to the city of Bayard, and then eventually to Santa Clara, and eventually back to the town. So the water rights that the town has are pivotal to the regional water plan. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about geohydrology of the area, just talking about the aquifer and how water moves through it. We'll talk about water use, historical water use that the town has diverted from the wells, and permitted water use, the amount that can be diverted, which is a larger quantity than the amount that's being used in this case. We also made a projection of water use for planning purposes over the next 40 years. It's very typical to, when you're making a water development plan, to come up with a high rate of growth and a low rate of growth, and to plan that out for the future. And we also do an analysis of water production. So not only do we consider planning a quantity of water for the future from a planning perspective, we also do an analysis that helps us understand whether or not the wells can produce that water. So let's talk about area geohydrology. This map here is a geology map of the area. It's surficial geology. The colors just represent different rock types. Okay? And there's one point that I want to make about the geology in the area. And it's that, and I'll point out the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide runs right through here, to this blue line. So Frank's Wellfield is here, the Woodward Wellfield, and Gabby Hayes and Anderson Wells are here. The airport area wellfield would be in this area. But one thing that I'd like to point out is there's this area that I'm showing right now up on the screen. It's kind of an orange area. That orange represents the Gila group. And that's really the principal aquifer that supplies your wells. And what's very interesting about that Gila group is there's a black line that runs right through here that represents a fault system. And this whole region here that I'm kind of circling with the mouse represents it's a trench. Okay, it's an area where the Gila formation is generally thicker than it is in other areas. And that's one of the main things that makes it be a relatively good aquifer in the area. Okay, so and also one thing that's good about the regional water plan is the wells that supply water to the regional system are also in the trench. So what's happening is water is being, for the regional water plan, water would be diverted from within the trench where you have a good source of water and routed to areas up on the shelf alongside the trench where the Gila group aquifer doesn't produce quite as much as it does in the deeper area. So you're taking water from where it is and moving it to areas where people live to help get water to that area. Okay? And so that's essentially the upshot of the geohydrologic picture here. So let's talk about town water use. And this is a detail of the well locations here on this figure. On the kind of northeast corner of the image is the town. Highway 90 is running south here. And the Continental Divide is once again this blue line. So off to the west here, this is Frank's Wellfield. Off to the southeast is Woodward Wellfield and Anderson Well. You can pretty much see these wells from the highway. And Gabby Hayes Well. It's a replacement well that was drilled about 5 years ago. And so what do we think about when we think about planning factors that are related to wells? So I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to show a little schematic of a well diagram. And this first image on the left here is meant to depict a well. This is the land surface near the top. When you have a well, you can almost think of it almost like a straw that's in a glass. And you've got a static water level. That's the water level that's in the well when the pump is not on. The moment you turn the pump on, the water level drops inside of the well. This little example here is showing a 75-foot drop between when the well is on and when it's off. Okay? And one of the things that the town does is the town monitors static water levels and pumping water levels. And the reason is because when you first construct a well or put a pump in it, you turn on your pump and your water level fluctuates when the pump cycles on and off. Maybe after 10 years or so, it might start to fluctuate a lot more. You might get a lot more drawdown when you turn it on. And that can be indicative of your screen getting a little bit clogged up. So the town will, what the town will do in that case is go in and rehabilitate the well and open up the, get more flow coming into the well, and that's just part of planning service life for your well. So that's one aspect of how you plan to maintain your wells to get a good service life for the future. Another aspect is as time goes on and you're pumping your well, if you look at the central diagram here, the static water level is lower now. What happens is after time, when you use your wells, the water level decreases. Eventually, if you pump it long enough, you can pull the water levels all the way down to the bottom of the well, and you won't be able to produce water anymore. So at that point, you can either deepen your wells or maybe move to different pumping areas. So well deepening is something that adds service life, and then maintaining the wells with rehabilitation is something that maintains service life. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about an analysis that we do to assess the capability of the wells to produce water in the future, and we have a model that allows us to do that, and it takes these planning factors into account. This next slide is historical groundwater diversions. So this is actually running on this horizontal axis here. It runs from 1945 to 2016. And these this is a bar chart, and the bars on here represent an annual quantity that's pumped in every year. So for example, if you come here to year 2010, you can see that the diversion totaled a little over 2,500 acre feet. The blue bar represents what was produced by Frank's well field, the gray bar comes from Woodward well field, and the orange comes from Gabby Hayes well. So it's also categorized into which well is producing how much for each year. And every year the town turns in meter records to the state engineer office because they track how much water you use. Since about 2010, on the average, the town has diverted about 2,400 acre feet per year. Now, I mentioned earlier that, water, after it moves through the town system, it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, so this next slide is a detail of that. In this image here, up toward the top, you can see Scott Park, out at the golf course. Here, where I'm running my mouse right now, is Ridge Road. The wastewater treatment plant is down near the lower part of the image. Water that comes out of the treatment plant it goes to three areas. Part of it goes to Scott Park for irrigation, so that's some reuse of that water, which is a good conservation measure. Part of it also goes to a nearby ranch. It's the Glen Ranch, and so part of the effluent is used to irrigate those ranch lands. And the remainder is discharged into San Vicente Arroyo. Okay, so the town could actually consume all of the water that's diverted at the wells, and part of it is reused. Before the town got a permit for groundwater credit, the water that was released into San Vicente Arroyo was some water that you would essentially lose from your system. It would recharge the aquifer, but you couldn't reuse it. So that's where the groundwater credit comes from. And the groundwater credit is up to 747 acre feet per year. Okay, let's talk about permitted water use. So in general, you've got your existing system and the planned system. The existing system is the well fields that I showed earlier, Frank's well field, Woodward well field, the Gabby Hayes replacement well, and the Anderson well. And each well field and each of those wells has a water right associated with it, and the total amount of water rights associated with the existing system is 4,566.64 acre-feet per year. Now, I mentioned earlier that in the last 6 years or so, the town has diverted on the average about 2,400 acre-feet per year. But you can actually go up a little bit more than 4,500. So you've got a couple thousand acre-feet of leeway there, which is good. You've got some room. One of the things to consider is all these wells could produce more water if you needed it. They could produce about 2,000 acre-feet more. So one of the things to consider that I'll talk a little bit about in the end is to take a look at the existing water lines that run from it to make sure they have the capacity to get you that extra 2,000 acre-feet in the future. You haven't had to use it yet, but you, as part of the plan, you will plan to use it in the future. Then there's the plan system, and the plan system is the airport area well field. And the airport area well field has 193.2 acre-feet of water rights. It had those before the groundwater credit was approved. When the groundwater credit was approved, it increased by 747 to give you 940.2 acre-feet per year. Okay. So altogether, with the existing system and the plan system, the town has 5,506.84 acre-feet per year of water rights. Now, one thing about the groundwater credit, it's 747 acre-feet per year, but the permit doesn't allow diverting it all the first year. It actually grows linearly from 0 to 747 acre-feet per year over a 40-year period. That means the first year you can divert about 18 acre-feet. The next year you can divert another 18, so it goes up to 36. Then you can divert another 18. Eventually it grows to 747. So it also gives some time to expand the system. But 193 could be diverted right away. And interestingly, that's about the average use that's listed in the water plan for the town of Hurley. So. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a specific place of use that's associated with the groundwater credit, and it's shown on the next slide. So it's kind of a green polygon that covers a pretty good-sized area. Starting down here at the airport area well field, it can be used anywhere from there up through Hurley, up to Bayard and Santa Clara to provide a supplemental or optional source of water for Bayard and Santa Clara. Hanover and Vanadium are also in the place of use, so they could also provide water in that area if it's needed. So there's a whole place of use here where it could be used, and that's just part of, when you get a permit approved at the state engineer office, they want to see a specific place of use. And at this point, that's what the place of use is. If you find in the future that you want to go anywhere else, you can file an application to expand the place of use. Okay, so we talked a little bit about town water use and permits to divert the water. Let's talk about projected water use. And a 40-year planning period is typically what's looked at for these water development plans. So in terms of projected water use, what you want to do is you want to consider studies that look at population growth. And the Southwest New Mexico Regional Water Plan is probably the best study to look at in this area. It's geared towards southwestern New Mexico. It's founded on a lot of studies that have gone on at the University of New Mexico with regard to population expansion. We looked at that and considered it, but we got into a little bit more detail for the town. We looked at water connections, or water taps, that get connected to the town system. So in terms of planning, the way that we're looking at it for this 40-year plan is to consider your system may expand and you have more taps that connect to it. That's something that can happen whether or not the population changes. So if the population changes and connects to the system, looking at water taps accounts for population change. Even if the population does not change that much and your system expands, looking at water connections is a way to cover both components of growth. So that's the approach that we took here for the 40-year projection. Okay? And it's pretty typical to come up with a high growth and a low growth, and to plan within that framework. That type of planning is done all over the state. So the information on water taps is shown on this next chart from 1993 to 2016, and it's categorized into taps in town and taps out of town. And if you look at the whole period since 1993, for which we have the data, the growth can be characterized with 1.6% per year in terms of water taps. If you look just over the last 10 years, the growth is not as much. It's about 0.5% per year. So we use those two numbers to characterize a high and a low growth rate. So the next slide actually shows the projected growth. Okay? So we're actually just showing time here from 1980 to 2060. And what we have right here is historical use. I'm sorry, 1990. It's not 1980. So these dots that I'm pointing at on the screen right now represent water use over about the last 30 years. And then this blue solid line is growth on the existing system at a rate of 1.6% per year. The green solid line is the low rate of growth, 0.5% per year. And interestingly, what we see is if in the next 40 years your water use or demand grows at a rate of 1.6% per year on your existing system, at this point here that I'm circling up on the screen right now, it exceeds the red line, and the red line is the water rights. So if you're on the high growth scenario, you'll actually exceed your water rights within the next 40 years, in about 37, 38 years. Okay? What we also have here are dashed lines. The dashed lines represent growth at the airport area well field. So that's part of the plan system. And what we see in that case is if you grow at a rate of 1.6% per year, you also exceed the water rights. If you're on the low growth, you don't exceed water rights at all. Okay? So what does that mean? What that means is we assess your water use and your demand in the next 5 to 10 years and see what it looks like. And if you need to make an adjustment at that time, then do so. So that's a typical part of planning. You don't say, we're going to do a 40-year plan, we're going to plan right now, and then that's exactly what we're going to do. You just make your plan, you move forward a few years, 5 years, 10 years, and see if you need to make some adjustments. It's part of your water use planning. Finally, I think it's very interesting and good planning to consider these growth rates, but what about the ability to produce the water? Is there a way to assess that? That's a very key component to the plan. So let's talk about that. A number of years back, when the town was putting together an application to apply for groundwater credit, one of the components to that study was to develop a model to help understand how the aquifer works and how water levels change through time. And that information was submitted with the application as a supporting document for the application that was approved for groundwater credit. One nice thing about having that model is it actually has been used for a number of questions that relate to water use by the town. And it's something that's there and can help to answer questions in the future as well. So it's a model-based analysis, and the model is calibrated. The model reasonably represents water level changes over the last 60 years. When you have a model that can do that, then you've got a tool that can help you understand what will happen in future projections. Okay. Now, and one of the things you want to consider is water use. If we're going to make a projection of water use by the town, hey, that's great. But what about water use by others, other than the town? And you want to try to consider everyone as best you can for your planning. So that's what we do here. We consider water use by others. We consider growth of use by the town, and then we project the yield of all the wells that we're considering here. So this next chart is water use other than by the town. So years ago, the state engineer put together a lot of records on water use by Santa Clara, Bayard, the mines. You've got Apache well field, you've got Whitewater well fields, Stark well field, Macaulay. You've got actually Tyrone Mine is built into this model as well. Domestic and stock wells. It's all built in here. There's a historical period. The historical period is the first part of this chart that shows variability every year. So there's a historical period and a future projection. This future projection that we're showing here is 40 years. And for planning purposes, what we did in the model is we assumed that water use by everyone else in the area is at their full water right. I don't think we really expect every entity to be using the full amount of their water right. But in terms of water planning for the town, it's a good way to prevent underestimating water use by others. And if you put everyone else pumping at their water right and then make a projection for the town, it's a good planning approach to figure out whether or not the town wells, whether it's feasible for the town wells to produce the water for the plan. Okay? So this very next slide shows a projection of use by the town wells, and what we see is that even if all wells in the area are producing an amount that's pretty close to their water rights, the town wells are still capable of producing water at that high rate of growth, which is 1.6% per year. That's actually a really, really good finding because it's indicating some reliability of their water supply. And the model has a lot of utility. Looking at the next slides on the left-hand side here, this is our best estimate of water levels in the area from a regional sense. The model can also be used to tell us how water levels change over the next 40 years. So on those projections that we made, the image on the right is showing water level changes. And the 40-year plan is good, but another thing that we did is we also did a long-term projection that runs about 300 years. Okay? And the next slide shows that. We're not running the model for 300 years because we absolutely know what's going to happen in 30 years, or we're trying to say what's going to happen in 30 years, or 300 years. It's just a way to address sustainability of the well field. Because when you pump wells, what happens is initially, it makes a cone of depression in the aquifer, and that cone expands radially. And when that cone intersects springs or rivers, it can capture flow from the river or from areas where groundwater would discharge. So what happens is, what we did is we ran the model to see what happens in the future without well deepening, just to see if you pulled water levels down pretty low in your wells, and the long term, what's the amount of water that we could estimate that would be produced. What we're seeing is that at the town wells, it's about 4,100 acre-feet per year. Okay? And about 900 of that is at the airport area wells, and about 3,200 of it is from the existing system. The existing system is diverted 3,000 acre-feet, I think, 1 year in 2000. So what we're seeing is that in the long term, the best estimate we have right now is that the wells could produce as much as the most they've ever produced out into the future. So, and for everybody else, everyone else produces in the long term about 9,600 acre-feet per year. So that means everyone in the Mangus Trench would be producing the sum of these two numbers, which would be 13,700 acre-feet per year in the long term. So it's a way to just address sustainability of the aquifer. And this next slide shows why that water is sustainable. This slide right here is showing the best estimate we have at this time of recharge for the aquifer. We think that there's about 13,600 that gets in as recharge regionally, We think there's about 4,600 acre-feet per year that comes in from the north. You add those two blue numbers, and the total inflow into the region is about 18,200 acre-feet per year. Okay? Now, this picture here is before anyone was pumping groundwater. It's 100 years ago, before there was a lot of development here, or even more than 100 years ago. And it's a long-term average. Okay? So out of that 18,200 that comes into the aquifer, part of it flows to the northwest and shows up in Mangus Creek. Part of it is evapotranspirated to support vegetation. Part of it flows into the Gila River. And the rest of it flows to the southeast into the Mimbres Basin. So we estimate about 9,100 acre-feet per year flows up to the southeast. And interestingly, there's been a few independent studies that quantify flow through here, and they all estimate right around 9,000 to 10,000 acre-feet per year. So there are independent studies that come up with a number very similar to ours. So then what happens when you pump groundwater? Well, if you pump groundwater for hundreds of years, you pull water levels down, and you capture some of that flow. So the next slide shows that essentially at the Gila River, it decreases flow by about 100 acre-feet. In terms of evapotranspiration, that's reduced about 1,000 acre-feet. Flow at Mangus Creek is reduced about 1,000 acre-feet, 1,100 acre-feet. And flow out of the basin toward the Mimbres is reduced by about 8,800 acre-feet. So what happens in the long term is after a while, your wells pull water levels down about as far as they could, and the model gives us a way to quantify the amount of water that's coming out of the wells, and that's sustainable, but it reduces flow that leaves the aquifer out to other areas. Okay. So the same amount is moving through the system, it's just it's not all going to natural areas now, part of it's coming out of the wells. That's how that works. So in the report, I actually have more conclusions than I'm presenting here. I'm just kind of summarizing them to kind of the key points. But what we're finding is that over the next 40 years, if you had a growth schedule of demand of 1.6% per year, our best estimate is that the wells can produce that water, which I think is a great finding. In the long term, the town wells can produce about 4,100 acre-feet per year. And we've also got some recommendations that are also in the report. I've got some of them here. One of the things to do for the future is monitor growth of use, of your water use and your demand relative to your permits. If you find that in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, that you're on a path of growth where it looks like you might exceed your water rights in the next 40 years, then seek some additional water rights. Some of the town wells are pretty old. They're still functioning, and it's good to use them for as long as you can. But some of them are 50 to 60 years old. Plan to be prepared. Some of them may need to be re-drilled or replaced. The town has a very good program of rehabilitating the wells, and wells that last 50 to 60 years is great. Use them as long as you can, but just be aware that at some point some of them may deteriorate and you'll have to replace them. I recommend testing yield down deep below 1,000 feet. Most all of your wells right now are in the high hundreds in terms of depth. Some of them are a little bit over 1,000 feet. But just in case you need to deepen beyond 1,000 feet in the future, I'd say when you drill a replacement, I'd go beyond 1,000 feet and measure the flow that you get from down deep. And track adjacent well field withdrawals. If any entities come in and say, we're going to start pumping more groundwater, just track that and see how that might affect your supply. And a couple of other recommendations that are not in the report that I suggest we add are, I mentioned earlier, inspect the capacity of the pipeline to the existing system to make sure it could handle an additional 2,000 acre-feet of water that could be produced in a year. And continue to move forward and work with the Grant County Water Commission on developing the regional water plan and the system. And one of the things that also in our projections, we saw that the Anderson well, it's in an area where the aquifer tends to be thinner. So right now that well's inactive. As you move forward with that well, you might consider some options of if you don't want to re-drill that well, one possibility would be to transfer the water rights to some of the other wells because the aquifer is a little bit thicker there. And that probably would be a pretty good approach to consider. So that's kind of the summary story there in the report. So I'm happy to address any questions or comments anyone may have.
Councilmember Smith?
I have just a couple of questions. You know, it was reflected in the report that the town of Silver City did a water conservation plan in 2013, and since that time our water use has diminished, decreased. And so we're going to continue with our water conservation. One of the things that I am really interested in is the recharge that we might see if we were to perhaps continue to do water harvesting or green infrastructure projects in town, rehabilitate ciénagas and work with streams and stuff like that. So what would be your recommendation on that?
Right now, the town has a permit for recharge, but it's for recharge that occurs below the wastewater treatment plant for whatever's released into San Vicente Arroyo.
So there's a difference perhaps between actual percolating down that could be done by green infrastructure and a formal recharge permit. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think the difference would be just that right now you don't have a permit for some of the projects that you're talking about. So that's something that could be looked into. The state engineer requires a demonstration that the water actually makes it to the regional aquifer. So some of the questions would be, how deep is the depth to water, and where some of these projects are, and if you have enough water loading that's going on there, part of that water makes it down, but you need to track that.
So if you can measure it, then you can really get it.
If you can measure it, then if you can demonstrate that it's happening, then you quantify it, and then you file an application to do that. When we did that at the wastewater treatment plant, we actually put some subsurface instrumentation that tracked water content and temperature. And we found that we could use those. The temperature was a really good tracer to show that it made it to the regional aquifer.
That makes sense. Yeah, great. One other question, and then we'll stop. On page 14 of the handouts that you gave us, and the map that shows, flows. So you have a series of blue arrows that you say are underflow coming from up in the northeast.
Yes.
Where is that coming from?
That's coming off to the north there. The geology is volcanic rock and a lot of limestone. You might notice if you drive up near Santa Clara out to Fort Bayard, you'll see some limestone bedrock that's there. A lot of that is out north, and there's a lot of volcanic rock. And what happens is recharge happens up in the north area, percolates down into the regional aquifer, and then flows into the Gila.
Okay, so that comes from like just rain? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
Yes.
So it's just the characteristic of the type of rock that allows it to kind of move it into the system. So if there was less rain or hotter temperatures or something like that, that would be a threat to that.
Yes, that would change that accordingly.
Okay.
And the numbers that we're representing there are a long-term average.
Okay.
Councilor,
Thank you.
basically, currently, that's a little bit of why we started working with the mining district on the regional water plan, is because their wells are up in those areas that can be affected by drought. And so the intent was to get the water down in the Mangus Trench.
From the trench.
The trench, the bathtub that he explained to me, and move it up there, and so that they could use it, especially during times of drought.
High temperatures of drought. Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you for your time.
Madam Council, I guess we'll bring this, it's been out for comment for a while, but if you don't have any changes, in probably at the second council meeting in November, we'll bring it for a resolution to adopt it. Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Brown? Okay. Next item is new business. The first item under 11A was a discussion and vote on whether to change the regular council meeting scheduled for October 24, 2017. However, after the agenda for tonight's meeting was published, I was made aware of some important town business that needed to take place on October 24, 2017. Mr. Brown, would you clarify this for us?
Mayor and Council, as you might remember, DFA last year came up with the new requirement that you cannot show any funds with negative balances. Well, because of our grants being on reimbursement basis, we're going to have a couple funds that are in the negative. And so we're going to have to do a budget adjustment to transfer money into those funds for a few minutes, and then at the same time turn around and move it back, just to make them happy. But they require it, so to make sure that we get our quarterly report approved.
Any questions for the council? If there are no objections for the council, I would like the council meeting scheduled for October 24, 2017 to stand as originally published. Any objections to that? Okay. The next item is 11B, is the approval/disapproval of notice of intent ordinance number 1263, an ordinance amending Chapter 6, Animals, Article 3, Rabies Control, Section 6-137, duty of owner to surrender animal for observation of the municipal code of the town of Silver City. Councilor Bedison?
Thank you, Mayor. If I could, before I talk about the ordinance, I'd like to have the Assistant Town Manager, James Marshall, come up and give a little brief history of this.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Bedison. This ordinance came about by a citizen who rents properties, had a visitor in town that was bit by a dog. And according to our current ordinance, you have 24 hours to surrender the dog and provide vaccination records. So this visitor to our town spent the next 24 hours staring out the door of their rental at the dog that bit her, while the owner took the entire 24 hours to surrender the dog. There are situations where the dog can be home quarantined. Generally, animal control is looking for the dog was not running at large when it bit somebody, or certain other extenuating circumstances. However, we felt in discussion and speaking with the citizens that there's a lot can happen with that dog in 24 hours, that it can go missing. The health care of the victim their treatment plans can be modified based on the evidence provided of vaccinations and the fact that we know the animal bit somebody and is in custody. So this was the proposal to have people surrender their dog immediately after becoming aware of the dog biting somebody, as well as providing our animal control or police the records of vaccination immediately. and not making us hunt them down.
Council Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. I would agree with, and that's the reason why I'm sponsoring this, with what staff requested. I think what's really important is we already have an ordinance in the books, or at least a portion of it, that states that you must provide, when requested, the vaccination records, but we included it in this proposed NOI in order to strengthen the fact that once the owner knows, or the custodian knows, or has witnessed the animal bite someone, they have to surrender it immediately to animal control, and they have to provide the vaccination records. It will really help the individual bitten to know that the animal has been vaccinated and is fully vaccinated, and that there hasn't been a lack of vaccination for a year or more in terms of certain things like rabies. And as Mr. Marshall pointed out, if the 24 hours of knowing that the animal is still out there is concerning, because for, I think, rabies vaccination to be effective for the rabies treatment to be effective for humans, it has to start pretty quickly if they believe that the animal may have it. Correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Rabies is a very, very horrible disease, and I know from individuals that have had to have the injections, and I think there's a different way of doing it now, but the injections of the past, that is very painful and very disconcerting to the person that was bitten. Because you continue to worry that you may get it, or that this won't be enough to stop it. And it's, I think, a pretty high fatality rate if a human gets rabies through a dog bite or other animal bite. 100%. Yeah, I didn't want to say that. There are a few success stories, and they're still working on ways to increase success with humans that are bitten. So with that, I move to approve of notice of intent ordinance number 1263, an ordinance amending Chapter 6, Animals, Article 3, Rabies Control, Section 6-137, duty of owner to surrender animal for observation of the municipal code of the town of Silver City.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Councilman Smith?
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion as stated.
Motion second. Any discussion?
Discussion from the chief.
Mr. Marshall, was there something?
I believe the question came up as to who is responsible for the fees incurred when an animal is quarantined by the town, and that is the owner's responsibility.
Okay. Council Edison?
And also, it would be the owner's responsibility to follow through on all of that, making sure the vaccination records, and as you said, the fees for not producing the vaccination records or the animal. Because there are fines levied in this proposed NOI, so.
Any further discussion? Any questions or comments from the general public? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. This concludes the business of the town of Silver City. Do I hear a motion? Councilman Smith?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.